South Sudan has had a bumpy road since becoming an independent nation. The country has been racked by violence, and renewed fighting between opposing army forces has raised fears of a return to civil war. Over the weekend, the country marked its 5th anniversary while panicked residents sheltered inside their homes. At least 275 people have been killed since Thursday. VOA's Zlatica Hoke has more on the latest round of sectarian violence.
President Salva Kiir and his rival, first Vice President Riek Machar, appeared together in a show of solidarity on Friday, the eve of the anniversary of independence, but heavy gunfire went on unabated.
There is nothing to be done about it, but we have to continue finding a solution to it.
Machar returned to Juba in April, which was seen as a step to end the fighting. But deadly clashes broke out late Thursday and went on while Kiir and Machar were meeting in an effort to defuse tensions.
This is an interruption to the good process which we have initiated.
The continued fighting raises a question of whether the president and his deputy can control their respective forces.
We would note that the senior leadership there in Juba were in a meeting as the clashes started. Those leaders have assured us of their commitment to resolve the tensions that have escalated in recent days.
South Sudan spiraled into a civil war after the president, an ethnic Dinka, dismissed his first vice president, an ethnic Nuer, in December of 2013. The peace agreement reached in August of last year, which reinstated Machar, has not made a difference.
Despite the peace agreement that formally ended the civil war in August last year, the conflict and instability has spread to previously unaffected areas, and this is what is really of concern.
The United Nations says none of the 2.5 million people displaced by violence in the past 3 years have yet been able to return home. Meanwhile, more people are getting displaced. Even the UN compounds and civilian protection sites in Juba have been caught in the crossfire in the past few days, prompting an angry response from UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who called on Kiir and Machar to de-escalate hostilities. The UN Security Council on Sunday condemned the violence in strongest terms.
The Security Council members stressed that attacks against civilians and UN premises and personnel may constitute war crimes.
Council members also are considering boosting the international peacekeeping forces in the country. Zlatica Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
A short time ago, at the United Nations, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon spoke about the fighting in South Sudan.
The renewed fighting is outrageous. It is yet another grievous setback. It deepens the country's suffering. It makes a mockery of commitments to peace. Many people have been killed in heavy fighting. There are growing fears that many more could die in another round of violence.
Well, joining us now from the United Nations in New York, VOA's Margaret Besheer. Margaret, please tell us more.
Hi, Vincent.
Yes, Margaret, tell us more about this possibility of an arms embargo and targeted sanctions on some of South Sudan's leaders.
Right. Well, as you can see, the Secretary General very angry today at Riek Machar and Salva Kiir. He has been repeatedly frustrated by these two leaders, and I think it's really showing. His peacekeeping chief last year was calling for an arms embargo. The council didn't move. You know, the Chinese, the Russians, some of the other council members have been reluctant to enact an arms embargo. But I think, you know, having it come from the Secretary General himself, it will have a bit more weight. And with the situation the way it is, the UN just can't afford to have yet another crisis escalating in the world. I mean, there's just so many crises right now, and the UN is really trying to keep up. So they do not want to see South Sudan unravel.
Talk about an arms embargo. I mean, these gentlemen who have two armies in the same town, they already have arms. So how effective does this become, especially when there is already a conflict on the ground?
Well, it's difficult to say, but if they can impose an arms embargo, it would limit new weapons coming to them, more sophisticated weapons perhaps coming to them, as well as ammunition. So if they run out of ammunition and there's no more ammunition coming in, then maybe the guns fall silent. But, you know, there's no guarantee that the Council is going to adopt this measure. The Secretary General also urged targeted sanctions against leaders and commanders. And so he's really quite frustrated. He also wants to see the force boosted, UNMISS, which has about 12,000 peacekeepers, 1,200 police. The Security Council said last night that is something they are considering. But, you know, as usual, the problem is getting them there quickly. They've asked regional countries to prepare to send troops. IGAD, perhaps, or the African Union might be able to step in and send troops quickly. Otherwise, the UN might have to tap its other missions in the region, perhaps in DRC. So we'll just have to see how fast they can get the troops there, because it's not a quick process if they're doing it from New York.
Now, talk about the arms embargo. Who is opposed to an arms embargo and why?
Well, I think traditionally in the Council, it's been the Chinese who have big investments in South Sudan. It's been the Russians who generally oppose arms embargoes. I'm not sure where Egypt stands on South Sudan in particular, but they've also sort of been against sanctions and actions against some countries in the past. So we'll have to see. I would think it's countries that sell arms to South Sudan that might be against it. They don't want to see their commerce affected. But the people are dying there. It's getting out of control. It's been since December 2013 now.
It is frustrating. Margaret, thank you very much for joining us.
And it's a huge humanitarian crisis.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Margaret. That's VOA's UN correspondent Margaret Besheer reporting live from New York.